Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webcast, The Power of a Neurodiverse Workforce, sponsored by TextHelp. This webcast has been pre-approved for HRCI and SHRM credit. Please be sure to attend the entire webcast in order to receive your credits, and you'll receive an email from hr.com within 2 business days, which will include your certification credit information. You may also log into hr.com and go to your View My Credits page where you can see the credits you have received. If you have any questions during the webcast, click on the Q&A in your webinar controls and type them there. I will post a link to the exit survey and the slides in the chat area once the presentation has started. A new tab will open in your browser with the webcast survey. Please be sure to complete it as soon as the webcast has ended. And now I have a brief introduction of TextHelp for you. So we're delighted to have a new sponsor on board this month. They're a company called TextHelp, and you'll really want to keep an eye on these guys as they're doing some wonderful things for organizations all over the world. Operating for over 20 years and with locations in Boston, Brisbane, and Belfast, TextHelp works across a variety of workplace sectors, including Fortune 500, 1,000 organizations like ASDA, part of the Walmart family, Citigroup, Virgin Group, as well as government, health, and not-for-profits, and they have an impressive 20 million users of their software in North America alone. Working alongside technology partners like Google and Microsoft, TextHelp's award-winning products, Read and Write and Browse Aloud, have changed the lives of millions worldwide. So we live in a diverse society, and successful organizations are increasingly recognizing the benefits it can bring. Embracing and supporting diversity, including neurodiversity, can help organizations reach out to and attract staff from a wider talent pool, with new ways of thinking and problem solving emerging as a result. A diverse workforce is also better equipped to engage more effectively with a diverse customer base seeking solutions. Organizations that fail to embrace diversity within inclusive workplaces risk finding themselves unable to attract and retain the kinds of customers, employees, and business partners that will constitute our changing world in 5 to 10 years. This TextHelp webcast presents the opportunity to discuss ideas to attract, support, and retain a diverse workforce. You'll look at a real example of a large corporate organization which is successfully making diversity and neurodiversity in particular work for them to deliver tangible business benefits. So let me hand you over to our presenters today, Aaron Lopez and Jason Gordon from TextHelp.
Thank you, everyone. Just wanted to start off by asking a quick question here. How many of you on the webcast have heard of the term neurodiversity? Please answer me or not me. Please take some time to select your answers and then hit the submit button when you're done. I'll pause here for a few seconds to read off the answers again, and we'll be listening to the webinar at a different time. Okay, so the term is still pretty new, so don't worry if you haven't heard of it. In today's modern workforce, most organizations pride themselves on having a diverse and inclusive workforce when it comes to age, gender, sexuality, and ethnicity, but the idea of neurodiversity, a neurodiverse workplace, is still quite new. It's estimated that over 40 million American adults are dyslexic, but sadly, only 2 million are aware. Over 10% of the US population have some form of hidden disability, including dyslexia, autism, and ADHD. These types of non-apparent disabilities are more understood now than just a few years ago, and organizations are growing acutely aware of the importance of ensuring work environments are welcoming to the neurodiverse staff. Employers are beginning to learn that they need the benefits that diversity can bring. For example, neurodiverse individuals may not do well in a traditional interview format, but they still have lots to bring to the table, including the ability to approach problems from a different angle and consider innovative solutions to business challenges. In other words, it's easier for them to think outside of the box. Similarly, people on the dyslexic spectrum may be a good fit for careers in creative industries due to their unique strengths in interpreting and visualizing designs. Autistic people, too, are usually disproportionately skilled in data analysis and IT-related tasks compared to their neurotypical counterparts. Many high-profile business people, politicians, and celebrities have spoken openly about their neurodiversity, such as Virgin Group founder Richard Branson, Apple co-founder Steve Jobs, Oprah Winfrey, HP co-founder William Hewitt, and filmmaker Steven Spielberg. Prominent examples of neurodiverse individuals making their mark on the C-suite and in part crediting their rise to the benefits of their neurodiversity clearly show how alternative thinking styles can make a real impact in business. On a personal note, I have a particular connection with one of these celebrities on the list. We all know Oprah is a media executive, actress, talk show host, television producer, and philanthropist, but she's best known for the show, The Oprah Winfrey Show. And guess who made it about 20 years ago? That's right, me. I won the State Youth of the Year. For the Boys and Girls Clubs of America back in 1998. The same year, Oprah raised enough money for all 50 state winners to go to college. The $25,000 that I received to continue my higher education has allowed me to be here with you today. It is a very memorable day and one that my family and I will never forget, but enough about me, let's get back on track. Many of the world's most successful business people will tell you that the difference between success and failure in business comes down to your staff. As Richard Branson says, clients do not come first, employees come first. If you take care of your employees, they'll take care of the clients. Taking this one step further, researchers at Harvard have found that if employees in an organization have more negative perceptions of their organization at one point in time, the bottom line of the company is likely to be weaker in the future. So if it is people that makes the difference between a business's success and failure, those people need to be different from those that your competitors have, right? Those people need to have unique talents and skill sets. We as business leaders need to harness those talents and optimize what they can deliver into our business, making us different and better than our competitors. So let me ask you another question. If you were pulling together your dream team to innovate on a new product or service, what talents would you look for? Lateral or creative thinking, problem solving, the ability to connect ideas, deep concentration, communication skills? Please take some time to select your answers and hit the submit button when you are done. I'll pause here for a few seconds again and read off the answers when they come in. Trying to pull in all the answers right now. Okay. So let's look at individuals who demonstrate these talents in themselves and have gone on to become highly successful and recognized in their fields. As of right now, we got 63% for lateral and creative thinking, about 57% for problem solving, 62% for the ability to connect ideas, 20% for deep concentration, and 61% on communication skills. Thank you for answering the poll questions. So let's take a look at Steve Jobs, for example. Steve Jobs didn't just innovate new products. His energy and his passion, his communication skills, his ability to connect ideas, problem solve, and to think outside the box completely revolutionized the way the world communicates verbally and visually, accesses and consumes music, and captures and shares images and memories. Not only that, but his innovation sparked the creation of other innovations to the extent that by 2021, 40% of the world's population is projected to own a smartphone. So thinking of Steve and the others on this slide deck and considering these skills and talents that make our businesses more competitive, what do all these people have in common? The answer is neurodiversity. We design our organizations for neurotypical people, measure everyone against standard performance measures, but as business leaders, we need to think differently about different thinking because neurodiversity can transform the fortunes of organizations. We live in an increasingly diverse society, and successful businesses are ones which recognize this and reflect the diversity of the public they serve in the staff that they employ. So here's a map of neurodiversity, the conditions within neurodiversity, and the skills, talents, and traits they present. In my role at TextHelp, I've had the privilege of working with individuals and organizations who are embracing neurodiverse talent. We're seeing increasing numbers of organizations creating advantage by harnessing neurodiversity. For example, GCHQ, they're the equivalent to Homeland Security in the UK. They actively seek to recruit spies and code breakers who have dyslexia and similar neurodiverse conditions. They recognize that dyslexic brain has a unique ability to solve complex problems and see situations from a different perspective. It has been proven that this group can spot patterns others do not see. Another example would be the BBC. And they have realized that individuals with autism can make excellent software and technology developers. The ability of deep concentration, fine detail processing, and extraordinary attention to detail makes people with autism ideal candidates for these roles. Neurodiverse individuals are often drawn to specific sectors, engineering, IT, and architecture, for example, nursing and caring professions, and emergency services too. So let's take a look at Jonathan Levine, for example. He balances a full-time scientific career with his own academic research, with the help every day from our software, Read and Write. Based in Baltimore, Maryland, Jonathan works as a genomics account manager at a life science company, Agilent Technologies. In parallel with this, he's currently studying for his MBA at Johns Hopkins Carey Business School after gaining his PhD at the University of Maryland in 2014. You can see from the slide that Jonathan admits to having to work twice as hard because of his dyslexia, so he really depends on getting the right support to help with his studies and his work. And it looks like he's found that support in Read and Write, which is great. So how are businesses harnessing neurodiversity in their workforce for a competitive advantage? It comes down to the way they find and recruit talent, how they support staff to overcome challenges to let their full abilities be realized and decide whom to hire and promote. Especially in large companies, HR processes are developed with an eye toward wide application across the organization. But there's a conflict between scalability and the goal of acquiring neurodiverse talent. The behaviors of many neurodiverse people run counter to common notions of what makes a good employee. Solid communication skills, being a team leader, emotional intelligence, persuasiveness, salesperson type personalities, the ability to network, the ability to conform to standard practices without special accommodations, and so on. These criteria systematically screen out neurodiverse people. What we can do as employers to make sure we don't miss these opportunities, let me introduce you to Lorraine Martins, Director of Diversity and Inclusion at Network Rail, a huge organization in the UK employing over 38,000 staff. They own and manage most of the railway network in Great Britain. Lorraine will explain how Network Rail embraces diversity and inclusion and how they support their neurodiverse staff members, which includes the use of assistive technology tool Read and Write, and ultimately how they are creating advantage by harnessing neurodiversity. Lorraine, over to you.
Of Network Rail, which is an organization with 39,000 employees. We are responsible for the whole of the rail infrastructure for the UK, which means that we have people working in maintenance and operative roles who will look after the track itself. We've got engineers, people who work in HR, comms, finance. So a whole range of different disciplines make up the composition of the workforce for Network Rail. We began really addressing diversity and inclusion about 6 years ago, and it was really important for us to think about how we could position it for such a diverse range of disciplines and indeed educational attainments. So we positioned diversity and inclusion as being about everyone. And the slide that you have in front of you, it contains a whole range of diverse icons, which was really to, I guess, respond to a bit of a pathology which people might have around diversity and inclusion, which is about others. And we wanted to say that everybody, whether you're male or female, whether you're Black, Asian, minority, ethnic, whether you're LGBT plus, or whether you're disabled, or the type of disability that you have, whether you're older or younger, diversity and inclusion is about everyone in Network Rail. And we took quite some time to kind of embed that message in our business, and indeed called our strategy Everyone's Strategy. Having worked on that, we then tried to work with our employees to ask a question which is not esoteric, but really says, who uses our railway? And again, from the image that you can see, we have a whole range of people that use our railway, from people who are disabled, to families, to people who use rail for leisure, for work, for play. And our infrastructure is about 150 years old. It wasn't designed for the range of use that we have now. It wasn't designed for the volume of use. We have 4 million passengers a day using our rail facilities. It wasn't designed for Wi-Fi or people who have mobility impairments or visual impairments. And so in a sense, we've said to ourselves, if we can begin to address those people who find it most challenging to use the railway, we will be providing a much more accessible and inclusive service to the whole of the country. So we really try to position diversity inclusion as impacting on everybody and getting us to think about how we might make sure we benefit and reflect those different communities. So one of the ways in which we've done that is to think about, I guess, in terms of the range, we've set up a whole series of employee networks. And the first side that you can see, which is Can Do, is the emblem for our disabled employee network. They have something like 500 members, and these members really help us to develop policies, to be a bit of a litmus test for the activities that we undertake, to identify areas where we need to improve, and also to identify those areas where we are challenged. And they undertake these activities on top of their day job. They have a leadership team which is elected biannually, and their strategy feeds into our corporate strategy. They also have an executive sponsor, so somebody who is on our paid exec, who gives them kind of license and permission to act. The middle picture that you see in the slide is our built environment strategy, which we call Places and Spaces for Everyone. And what we've used this strategy to do was to introduce the concept of inclusive design, which is a set of principles which put people at the heart of what you do. And for us as a company that is responsible for managed stations and for the infrastructure, it means that we are now beginning to think and to embed principles that say, well, if somebody is disabled, or they've got a wheelchair, or they're visually impaired, or they have a buggy, or they've got lots of luggage, how can we make our facilities inclusive of those individuals by taking on inclusive design principles? So things like wayfinding and signage, we think about the distance between seatings, all of those things are improving as we embed these principles. Similarly, we think about the built environment for our work colleagues, so all of our employees, and the extent to which we have prayer facilities, quiet rooms that people might need. We think about how we can create those spaces. And in implementing that policy, that strategy, as well as our own policies, we've become what's known as in the UK as a disability confident leader. This is a government-backed scheme where organisations have to evidence that they think about disabled employees, their journey through employment, how we can attract disabled people, how we can provide the right support. And we've got lots of evidence of doing that, and we're really proud of that. And one of the things that we do well, or should I say we're improving our approach to, is something that we call reasonable adjustments. And in the UK, this is a legal requirement of organisations, public sector organisations, to make sure that disabled people have a level playing field. Now, Aaron, earlier in his slide, he talked about specifically around neurodiversity, and he mentioned the engineering sphere. We have a number of people who work in highly detailed conditions where detail is really important for them. So if you imagine, we run timetables for trains. We really do need people to be very precise and very accurate about what they do. And so what we did was introduce the read and write gold as part of our reasonable adjustments. And so what you see now are the results. And it came about because a couple of individuals wanted us to make an individual adjustment for them because they were dyslexic or dyspraxic. We looked at what the cost of that might be, and we determined that actually it made much more sense to buy a corporate license and create access for that resource as widely as possible. So that costs for us £120,000. To you, that's $157,000. And what we have is open access to the text help software on desktops, laptops, and iPads. And that is versus a cost of £350 or $458 per person, just to have the individual license. And similarly, if you have an individual license, you would generally have had your line manager agree to the reasonable adjustment. What we found by having text help and by making it available to anyone and everyone, we've had a phenomenal amount of requests which is 916 requests to utilize this software. And these were people that we did not know about. So we have a system of recording diversity data where we encourage our employees to record their ethnicity, their gender, their disability, sexual orientation. But there's no compunction, you don't have to do it. So particularly around disability, partly because we're a critically safety critical business, we think there's a definite underreporting of disability. Introducing text help, as I said, has really given a great increase in the number of people who have been utilizing the resource. And we're really pleased. It's an unintended consequence that we didn't anticipate. We're really pleased with it. And as you can see from this slide, we saved $262,000. And we think that's just the money. We're not even talking about the time that we saved having introduced this resource. So what impact has this had? So I think the first thing at the top, the grey slide, is it helps people do their work. And so what people have said, you know, I've got reports to write, I can utilize the resource, it will make sure that it's accurate, that there aren't any spelling mistakes, and it just helps people do their work. The second comment that people universally make is that I don't need my line manager's permission. So this gives individuals in the business autonomy to access a resource which can help them, enable them to work better without any recourse or requirement of anybody giving them permission. And that's been a really liberating factor for our neurodiverse employees, because one, they don't have to necessarily share that they've got a neurodiverse condition, but two, they can just crack on with what they need. The other benefit, going around the hexagon, is they can use it anywhere. So people talk about going on to, whilst they're coming to work, they can listen to reports, they can activate it through dictation, and so they use it anywhere, and it just makes for a much flexible way of working. A further unintended consequence is that they share the resource with their colleagues, so that people who don't necessarily have a neurodiverse condition have been benefiting from the access to this resource. So they've seen people doing it and they've gone, oh, wow, that's really helpful. That's really great. And consequently, it makes a fantastic difference on their well-being, on their happiness and engagement in the workplace, and indeed their performance. So they are now able to perform at their optimum because they've got access to a resource that they can use at any time. And the other issue is that it is discrete. So again, in the UK, and again, particularly for Network Rail and organisations that are safety critical, people are reluctant to share the extent to which they may have a disability because they think it may impact on their job chances. And so this level of discretion and privacy is something that people have really benefited from. And ultimately, it makes their lives easier because also they can use it at home and their family can use it. And these are things that we hadn't really anticipated. So we're really pleased with the feedback and the uptake that we've had from the resource. So what are our next steps? So on this slide, Everyone Matters is the title of our next, of our diversity inclusion branding, really. So we've moved from it being everyone to Everyone Matters. And that really is a kind of development in our thinking as a business to say that, the extent to which you are disabled or gender diverse or LGBT or race and ethnicity or religious belief is important to you as an individual. It matters, and it matters fundamentally that you're respected. What we're trying to do is to address the sensibility of things being very separate and not having any connection. And this speaks really to the intersectionality of diversity and the range of identities that people have. We've also got a whole series of toolkits that people can use. And again, you've got a snapshot of the cover of how you can make reasonable adjustments in the workplace. And we've got an interactive toolkit which we have published, which enables managers to have really positive conversations with their employees should they have any changes in their circumstance. so that they can provide the right adjustments. So that's a whistle-stop tour through what we've been doing, and particularly focusing on neurodiversity. We really think that having created access to this resource, it's really had a great benefit to a number of people that we had not necessarily identified or were known to us. And the spin-off has been that they've been able to share the resource with others and really say that we're an employer that's very inclusive and very diverse.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Lorraine. It's fascinating to hear from different organizations, both how they're using our software, but how it's fitting into their wider inclusion and their diversity agenda. So I just want to follow on with a few more points and picking up on some of the things you've said, Lorraine. And then I'm sure everyone that's on the call today will probably have some questions for you, so feel free to start sending those questions in. But in the US, it's the same. In the UK, we have certain legislation around the Equality Act and things like that, and we have protected characteristics. So people do need to have reasonable adjustments, but it's a similar situation in the US where we have the Americans with Disabilities Act, and it prohibits discrimination against people with certain disabilities. But it's not just the law, it's also about doing the right thing. It's also about taking care and looking out for others and making sure people have a good experience when they come into the workplace. When we talk to other organizations and we talk about this concept of supporting diverse talent, we come up against lots of new ways of thinking. We always learn every time we go to an organization. It's a learning experience with us. Whenever we speak to Network Real, we learn from you guys. And some of the things that we've picked up through the years is this whole concept of creating an inclusive work environment. I think a lot of organizations are very good at diversity. They're very good at recruiting, because you can do that on a CV and things like that. You can recruit from diverse backgrounds, but creating an inclusive work experience, that's almost the challenge. How do we include everyone from different cultures, from different backgrounds, from different race, gender, ethnicity, like you say? So how do we create an inclusive environment for people with neurodiversity? And one of the things we find from a lot of organizations, this central idea here of providing assistive technology on a central network for easy access for everyone. Because like you say, there's a lot of issues around stigma, there's a lot of issues around disclosure, and quite often people don't want to raise their hand and say, look, I need a little bit of help here. So it's all about creating an inclusive environment. What we find as well, things like encourage and champion. So there's people within the office who are quite happy to, wear the lanyard that states, what group they represent, and they're champions for those people. The HR make it aware at the start of when someone starts their career that assistive technology is available for everyone. That managers, that leaders, that the employees, they're aware of conditions like dyslexia, and they're not afraid to talk about it. They're not afraid to offer help and offer support to make sure that people are trained up. And this concept of removing the barriers of disclosure, I think, is vital, because quite often we hear all the time of people in organizations who have sort of struggled on silently and have taken their work home with them in the evenings whenever their colleagues are sitting back having a glass of wine. But this sort of software can make a huge difference. What we found speaking to people is that the workplace can quite often look like this, that it's an uphill struggle, that it's one step after another step after another step. And as the picture shows there's just no end in sight to their struggles. But what we want to do at TextHelp, and what we've set out to do with our software, is create something that looks a little bit more like this, where accessibility is integrated into the same walkway as everyone else. So everyone can take the same path, everyone is on the same journey. And if you ever actually stop and look at a wheelchair ramp, yes, we know that it's essential for somebody in a wheelchair, but we know it's beneficial for everyone else, because somebody comes along with a pram, someone comes along with a bike, someone comes along with a delivery trolley, and everyone makes use of that accessible tool. And that's what we hear from more and more organizations, that yes, they've rolled the software out for a niche group, a niche community who it's essential for them, that they really, really need to do their job. But like you're saying, their colleague looks over and goes, that's a great feature, I could use that there. That MP3 tool, that'd be great for me. I could use that every day. So this is what we want to create. We want to put inclusion at the heart of the workplace, and using software, using assistive technology is just one of the ways that we can do that within an organization. I have a few questions for you. You can just see some of our contact details on the screen there now. But as Lorraine, I joined her today in Birmingham, UK, England, which is much colder than Birmingham, Alabama, where some of you may be today. But Lorraine just had stepped off the stage from a large conference here where she was speaking to over 350 of her internal diversity inclusion champions. So Lorraine, perhaps you could share, how can you set up these staff networks and have success so that people can feel included, that people can feel they have a voice in the workplace?
Thank you for that, Jason. So I mentioned in the start of our presentation that we have a number of employee networks. We have indeed 6 employee networks. We have Archway, which is for our LBGT plus employees, Cultural Fusion, which is for our Black, Asian, minority ethnic employees, Can Do, I've mentioned already, as a disabled employees, Inspire for gender diversity, a multi-faith network, and a carers network called Myriad. And when we started on this journey, the first thing that we did was identify, as I said, the kind of demographics of our business. And we played those stats back, and we said, look, there's an underrepresentation of Black, Asian, minority people, women, and et cetera. And we put out a call through our intranet site and said, does anybody want to set up a network? And we gave permission for people to do that within their working day. And it started off quite small. So this is about 5 years ago. With a couple of individuals. We'd never had any networks there. Sometimes I think in the States you might call them affinity groups. So we'd not done it before. And for the nature of our work, which can be quite remote, people working in dispersed offices, people use the technology to say, okay, we'll do it and we'll convene it. And I guess from a zero start, we now have 3,000 people across the business who are members of the networks. They're kind of democratic, so they develop their leadership teams. They have an action plan. They have a small budget, which my team facilitates. And all of the activities that they do supplement and complement our overall diversity strategy. And I think what we've done is create space for them. We've allowed and given them permission to exist. And they are very active in influencing policies, our strategic approach, helping us to reflect the organisation in terms of our passengers, and bringing that intelligence to inform the services that we might provide. So they get great validity from existing. We have, as I said, exec members who sponsor them and give them permission to exist, and they're highly active. And I think it's a measure of their engagement that we've got such large numbers. Again, we hadn't anticipated. We don't put a moratorium on them, and they are empowered and engaged in our work over and above, I think, other activities, and we have just benefited exponentially for their existence.
You say there you've over 3,000 members in these groups. For some employers, that would be a frightening thing, to think that there's 3,000 people actively engaged and actively speaking up about these issues and talking about these issues. And there's a question that came through here from Matthew, and I'll just read it for everyone. Do you think that some employers and or supervisors have concerns that their inclusivity initiatives might backfire? For example, provide a venue for discrimination lawsuits if the effort stumbles. What can HR professionals do to allay those concerns or those fears? That's
a really great question, Matthew. I think we have adopted, our strategic objective is to be an open, diverse and inclusive organisation. And that forms the heart of our narrative of what we're doing and why we're doing what we're doing. So our activities might be that we're trying very hard to do the right thing by people, make the right investments, and keep continually playing back the narrative of creating an open and inclusive organisation, and that we're trying. So by playing back the demographics of our organisation, we said, this is what we look like. It's not commensurate with what our society looks like. It means that we are probably missing out on talent. We know we've got an ageing population. So actually we want to be a much more attractive proposition to people who might not have considered our sector somewhere to work. And that's the fundamental basis of what we're doing. So that's the kind of sales pitch that we have to the organisation. And what we've said is also that some things might not work. So we've not said that everything that we do is a panacea, but more that we are taking calculated risks to do the right thing. And I think there's more danger if we don't adopt those initiatives of ending up in litigious circumstances. Because if, for example, employees say they're not being treated well, they have legal recourse, which we can avoid if we do the reasonable adjustment, if we're more open and if we're more inclusive. So I hope that that helps to allay those concerns. You have to keep reiterating why you're doing the work.
Yeah, I'm thinking that there, if you've 3,000 people in those groups, you have an active sort of feedback loop, which is constantly feeding back into the organization. It's coming up the chain to leaders like yourself. How has the sort of feedback from those groups perhaps changed some of your practices? I'm thinking maybe around sort of recruitment and even sort of internal reviews and how you handle those sort of situations.
So we have a process which we've introduced, which is called diversity impact assessments. And we've introduced them for all policies, projects, and programs that we're responsible for. And at the outset, what we require people to do is understand the effect of what they're proposing on different communities. And we use our networks as a consultation arm for those processes. So they're able to give us feedback. Well, if you do that, actually it's going to have an adverse effect. What could you do in mitigation? And so that's starting to embed the very thinking that we need in order to be much more inclusive. So the networks form a ready-made kind of test bed for the things that we're doing. Absolutely, absolutely. And we encourage them always to tell us what we're doing well and to tell us what we're doing that needs to be improved. So we're really open to that, and open to not always doing what people want, but hearing how we cool things better.
Yeah, cool from that. And just the questions are sort of starting to come in quick and fast now. A question from Claudio here. Have you had experience in helping communication between what some would call neurotypical employees and Asperger's or autistic employees who tend to be really good with technical or mathematical jobs, but maybe not necessarily so good with the communication side of things?
Yeah, Claudio, I would say that we're learning. We're learning, and I think the underpinning of that learning is that every individual is different. So one solution that we identify for one person is not necessarily the same solution for others. So what we encourage our line managers to do is to have the conversation, to check out what people need, and to be receptive to trying how to make the right arrangements. So we try and facilitate that. Sometimes it works really well. Sometimes we're less successful, and it tends to be, where it's less successful, it tends to be about a line manager who is uninformed and therefore thinks that they have a view in their mind about how people should be and what they should do, and they're not necessarily open to being a bit more flexible about their approach. Now, we've also done some pilots where we've had people on the autistic spectrum who require quiet spaces to undertake work, and we've tried to facilitate it, and that has worked really well. And we've had a scheme where we've done that with some graduates, and so we're using that learning to try and grow our confidence really about how we might respond appropriately. But I think the bottom line is that we say to people, while some people might be good at some jobs, it's not to make that assumption, it's to check it out and to be willing to change our approach and be open to doing something differently.
Just to follow on there from Claudio, if so, should help be done discreetly or openly? Should these be dressed in a discreet manner? Or
I think it's at the behest of the individual involved. Some individuals are really quite comfortable about saying, actually, this is my condition, I need help. Others may have a slightly different approach. And that, I think, reinforces my point about really working with individuals and their particular requirements rather than our needs as an organization. Because our fundamental need is that somebody can do their job really well. So it's thinking about how can we make those conditions right for that individual.
Yeah, I was just listening this week at an event we were at here in Birmingham. It was Angela Rosberg, the head of HR for Dropbox. And she was making a point of sort of around work environments, that what might be good for me. So if I'm the CEO of an organization and I want this really funky workspace with ping pong tables and darts and, all sorts of activities happening, it might look really good to me, but the people I really need to recruit in my organization, it might be awful for them, and that noise and clutter and all that there can be really distracting for some people. And just Shauna here has put through a question saying organizations are growing acutely aware of the importance of ensuring work environments are welcoming to neurodiverse staff. And this is equally important during the attraction and recruitment stages. So with your awareness, Lorraine, of neurodiversity, has this altered Network Rail's recruitment process? And if it has, in what ways?
Absolutely, Shona. Great question. It's also insofar as the way in which we advertise, and also in terms of our assessment centres. Up front, we say, if you have a particular need, please, please, please let us know. So, and therefore, from that interaction, we're saying very clearly that we want to work with you. We want to give you as great an opportunity to perform as we possibly can. So that might mean that you need some additional time. It might mean that you need access to the software. We're really open to that suggestion, and we live it out. And we wouldn't have got our disability confident status, leader status, if we weren't implementing those policies. We've had to train our recruitment people to make sure that they are reiterating that.
Culture change
And
for
an
them,
absolute culture change for them. And similarly, line managers, hiring managers who are involved in that process, so that they understand why we would make any adjustments that we make. So it is a slow burner, is a change, and it's something that we're becoming increasingly more confident about.
Yeah, I recently heard another sort of business leader put it like this: do I want to recruit someone who is good at interviewing, or do I want to recruit someone who's good at doing their job?
Absolutely.
And quite often those are very mutually
absolutely. They're not always They're not always the same thing.
So it's striking that balance, getting someone in that is good at doing their job.
Yeah.
So just picking up on another question here, which is perhaps focusing more on the read and write software that you used within Network Rail. What did you find were the benefits of providing that software sort of organizationally wide, as opposed to just doing it one individual at a time?
So I think the first benefit was economics of scale. So we saved quite a bit of money, over £200,000 in investment by buying the corporate license. And in doing that, what we did immediately then was make it available to whoever wanted it. So we had quite a big campaign saying to people that we've got this software. If you need it, you can download it. It's really easy to access. We also had a few champions who were there helping people to learn how to use it. So we made that resource available. And then we had a whole campaign, which was a series of people who were utilizing the software, then sharing their experience. And that kind of comms campaign really helped to create wider usage, I think. So when you see we've got over 900 requests, it's because we've promoted its availability. And that means the more people use it, the more economies of scale that we benefit from. And then you can't underestimate, Shona, the benefits on the individuals. So it's one thing for us as an organization to say we're providing you with this resource. It's another thing for people to feel happier, more autonomous, that they can perform and they can do their work with very little intervention from somebody else. And that there's no substitute for people feeling a sense of autonomy and governance over what they do when they want to do it. And that's been fantastic benefit for us as a business, because people are really happy to do their work because they feel confident they've got the right software that can enable them to perform at a really great level.
So obviously, it's interesting listening to you. It's obvious that you are sort of industry leaders in this sense. You are sort of leading thoughts in this. You're doing something that maybe other organizations aren't doing. Picking up on what you've done with Disability Confident, how are you sort of sharing the good news, as it were, with other organizations? How are you trying to make this a more attractive proposition for other organizations?
So we take great pride in what we're doing around diversity and inclusion, and we want to work in an environment where all businesses are kind of benefiting from diversity and inclusion. So at any stage that we promote our own approach. Not to say that it's the best, but to say that we have benefited from using assistive technology, from having an approach, a culture that's more open, more inclusive. And so one of the examples of doing that is that we wrote to our supply chain, and we said to them, we're really conscious that we want to do better by our disabled employers. And these are the organizations that we work with. And we gave out the names, and we said, you might want to explore, not that you have to, but you might want to explore how these companies can support you as an organization. And we did that because we wanted to lead, but also because we feel that if we create an environment in which this is the standard, that means that more people can perform better. We are more diverse. We are reflecting our society much better. And we also, fundamentally remove barriers which needn't be there, which provide, restrictions and inequalities. So we take it seriously. We want everyone to be able to perform at their best. And we want to tell our story, which is, I guess, is why I'm here today with you.
Yeah, fantastic. And it's great to hear your insights. Just picking up on a question here from Dorothy. What she's saying is, can I assume this is only as successful as it is if it is infused into the DNA of the organization, the culture, the vision, the mission, values, and competencies what we expect of our leaders. I think it's quite a loaded question, because I think we do need that leadership buy-in. For perhaps organizations that are struggling to get buy-in from the leadership, is there any advice and guidance you could give?
I think, Dorothy, that's a really important observation. I think because it connotes, I've got in my visual interpretation of that is like a bit of an intravenous kind of injection that is slowly going up and down the veins of a body. So in a sense, it's a slow burner, and it takes a lot of reiteration. It takes a lot of really positive communication, really great case studies that help to reinforce the successes that we're having. We are really clear with our leaders that we benefit from having diverse teams. We've got evidence which is supporting that. We're seeing greater levels of safety, greater levels of engagement where we have diverse teams. So this is our own evidence. And we play that back to the business, that people's performance is just increasing because they feel valued, because they're enabled to do their work really well. So that infusion is really, really important from top to bottom. Right across the organization, we try to give really consistent messages about the importance of what we're doing and how integral it is to us being a really great organization.
I think it was, again, at the conference this week, there was a stat given out that teams that feel included and teams that are engaged are 38% more productive. So in essence, they're almost as a business case just for this. It's not just about supporting staff. It's not just about creating a nice environment, but this actually has a major effect on the end of year results. Those sort of lagging indicators when we look at the ROI at the end of the year, and we look at the profit and things like that. Things like inclusion, things like diversity, things like taking care of your staff and making sure that staff have a voice and staff have the support they need. That's actually what makes a huge, huge difference in the business. And it's not just the product.
Absolutely.
It's those internal staff.
Absolutely. And Shona, I think you've asked the question about how to get senior management buy-in. I guess we've just got a new chief executive who joined us in September this year. And before that, the chief exec before that was very vocal on diversity and inclusion. And in a sense, that was a baton that he's handed to the next chief exec. And that's a really useful tool to have if your chief exec is very vocal about diversity and inclusion. Our chief exec came to the conference that Jason talked to today. He was here today sorry about that. Our chief exec was here with us today, talking about the importance of diversity and inclusion to him. He shared his personal stories about why it's important, and he was very authentic in the delivery of the message. And in a sense, that then gives you permission and gives others permission to share their personal stories about why diversity and inclusion is important and how they see it being part and parcel of what they do. And those personal stories and sharing and making it individual is really key to getting not just senior leadership, but to a whole business kind of seeing why it's relevant to them. So wherever you're able to make it a personal story that has resonance for people, then they are more able to understand why it makes sense to address it.
And picking up on that, personal stories, I know there was a video that was produced in conjunction with Network Rail, and there was a character there, Jason, not myself, but another gentleman, Jason, that works within the organisation, and he was saying how he was able to use our software trackside, and it made a real difference in his day-to-day role. How often do you get to hear those stories, and how does that make you feel as the leader who's instituted those changes?
We hear these stories all the time, and it's just fantastic. These small things that we don't anticipate necessarily what the positive impact is. We just know it's the right thing to do because we're creating an inclusive environment. But regularly, our inbox, people pass us by and say, "Oh, Lorraine, thank you for doing that. Thank you for doing this. This has made a real difference." And so that gives you a great fillip and a great catalyst, because we also hear the stories of when we don't do it so well. And so it's to remember there's a balance between, the things that we know we can do well, and also understanding how far we have to go to make sure that those practices are really consistent across a workforce of nearly 40,000 employees.
And I just picking up on another question that's came through here. Some of the the changes you're talking about are very much strategic, top level, things like that there. For maybe, professionals who are on the phone here, perhaps they're with smaller organizations and they maybe can't do big strategic changes. What are the simple things that they could be doing to help support neurodiverse staff, things like maybe flexible working hours or things like that?
Absolutely. So I think flexibility is the untapped resource that we need to be really addressing, particularly for smaller organizations and for if we're thinking of the younger generations that have different expectations of work to that which older generations have. So being able to be flexible, providing people with the technology and assistive technology to work in remote places if that's appropriate or possible. Creating a small place that may well be a quiet space for individuals, being cognizant of the needs of your individuals, asking the question of people, what do you need? It makes a real difference. And in asking the question, being prepared to respond appropriately. I think also for smaller organizations, it's letting people know what your intent is. I found if you always say to people, I intend to do this, help me, you'll find that your employees they genuinely will help you, and they will like that you've been quite open and honest about that. So I think for smaller organizations, it's in your day-to-day practice, the ways in which you interact with your people and the ways in which you demonstrate your commitment to them and valuing them will steer you in good stead. So as I said, being able to be flexible, looking at hours, thinking about how you can get the best out of people, I think it's just part and parcel of good people management.
Like you say, quite often it is just asking the question, because that person quite often knows the help they need. They know the support they need, whether it is software, whether it's a set of headphones or away from the photocopier, which is making a lot of noise all day long. So it's having that openness to have that conversation. So instead of, recruiting some consultant to come in to suggest the change, just ask the person.
Absolutely.
And so just sort of, if you could summarize perhaps, for organizations out there who are wanting to embark on this journey of, recruiting more neurodiverse staff and have sort of real diversity, real inclusion, and have it there at the core of their business and the core of their operation, and actually taking it a little bit deeper, just picking up what Dorothy's saying here, how to take it deeper. Sometimes that is effort, sometimes it seems like a struggle, and that's where it quite often can get derailed. How do you push through those barriers and just...
I think it's about resilience, and it's also about having, to quote a famous person, I think from the States, is keeping your eye on the prize. And the prize is high performance and happy staff that deliver fantastic products for you. So it's knowing that, things don't happen overnight. Generally, people want to do their best. And I guess us as employees is how do we create that environment that means people can do their best. There's sometimes stress points, there's sometimes things that happen, but it's in that interaction with your individual that you give signals, very clear signals, sometimes conscious, sometimes unconscious, about the extent to which you appreciate your individuals. And I think doing that is how you embed it, how you take it deeper. And rewarding people for being consistently caring and checking in with their individuals and making sure that the engagement levels are high is part of making sure that you're continually checking in with your people, that they are able to do what they need to do for you. And so it can't be done overnight, Dorothy, as you've said. It is something that you need to set out a long-term approach, I think, a long-term approach that becomes part and parcel of the way in which some greater results.
That's fantastic, Lorraine. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon. And it's great just to hear real thought leadership from someone who is at the pinnacle of such a large organization and really driving change. So thank you so much for your time. I was going to say this afternoon, but I guess for many of the people listening in here, it's quite early in the morning for them. As you can see on the screen here, we've left the contact details for Aaron, who's based in the US, and for Lorraine here. By Twitter, by email, we're happy for you to reach out and contact us. And right now I'm going to pass back to Hester, our host, to round things off.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank our presenters as well as all of you for joining us today. If you'd like to view this webcast again, the archive recording and the slides will be available for up to 7 days for our free members and without restrictions for those with our certification membership. The webcast credit will show in your hr.com account within 2 business days, and we will also send you an email with the credit information for you. Your feedback is important to us. Please take a moment to fill out the exit survey that opened in a new browser page on your computer. This concludes our webcast. Enjoy the rest of your day.